Hey, the meeting is being live streamed. Got it. That should be about it. We'll hang fire and hopefully it should appear on LinkedIn in a moment. But in the meanwhile, Andy Kingston, welcome to VUX World, my friend.
Thank you. Great to be
It's
here.
It's a pleasure to have you alongside. Definitely, it's a bit of a different setup to usual. We're broadcasting through Zoom, so yeah. Deepgram, apologies, your logo isn't on the screen, but I will give a shout out to Deepgram before we kick off for presenting VUX World. Deepgram is industry leading speech recognition, and if you are in the market for speech recognition to build voice assistants or any kind of transcription service that you need in your call center, in your products, whatever it might be, Deepgram is the place to go for that. Deepgram.com/VUX World is where you can go to find more information. That is deepgram.com/VUX World. And there we have it. So, yeah, thank you for joining us, Andy. I appreciate your time. Whereabouts are you in the country again?
I'm in Yorkshire.
Yorkshire, likewise. Yeah. Likewise, we are a couple of Yorkshire goers right now. It's weather's all right as well. I've been griping a little bit recently because I don't think that Harrogate has been overly kind to me in terms of sunshine, but the last few days seem to be all right, so it's on the up now.
Yeah, it's looking nice. It's been sunny here today. It's just clouded over. But...
Yeah, nice. So, Andy, you're the head of UK customer service strategy and transformation at HSBC. A lot of people tuning in now will definitely be aware of HSBC, huge bank, global operation, and well, maybe as we'll start, we're going to get into the conversation about how you, your team, and the organization has been using conversational AI. But maybe before we kick off, maybe it's a bit about yourself might be interesting in terms of your background and how you started at HSBC, and maybe a little bit about your role as well would be interesting.
Yeah, so 22 years nearly with HSBC now. Started on the management trainee scheme, mostly in and around the branch networks. I spent 15 years working in branches across the UK. A short stint in the head office before the last 5 years being part of UK contact centres, more recently renamed UK customer service team. My role is to look at how we deliver great customer service through the adoption of technology, but blended with our people. And I'm sure we'll come into some examples of what that looks and feels like throughout this conversation. And then the last nearly 3.5 years now has been about conversational banking, conversational AI, how we adopt some of those technologies and some of the ways of working with our people kind of sat in and around it to turbocharge it for our customers. And it's going pretty well.
Nice. And so I'm aware of HSBC exploring channels like voice assistants and stuff like that. I won't name the person there, but had plenty of conversations around how HSBC has been exploring some of those emerging channels, voice-enabled devices, voice assistant platforms, stuff like that. In your kind of area, looking at customer contact center operations, various other digital channels, where did the need come from? Like, why bother with this stuff? Like, where did it all start?
Yeah, if you go back 4 years, we were predominantly a call center, named a contact center, but really a call center that also handled a bit of email. But what we saw is customers were more and more utilizing our digital channels, so public website, internet banking, mobile banking, and we knew we needed to move the service closer to those interactions. What we see today is a huge growth in digital logons, customers accessing the app nearly every day now on average. And we knew at the time that we needed to move the customer service part closer to where those customers were, rather than asking them to come to the contact center. So the last 3 and 4 years has been about creating new channels, creating new contact points for customers to be able to get access to help. And I guess what we've seen, the pandemic kind of shone a light on it more than anything, but it was already there, was that customers were starting to adopt this kind of on-demand lifestyle in their banking.
Mm.
So I've talked passionately about on-demand banking for some time now, because we see it. Customers want the same control in their banking as they do with their television, online shopping, food delivery. It's the same needs you're trying to meet. Just the stakes are slightly higher. If your on-demand pizza ordering goes wrong, you might have some upset children sat around the dinner table. If your on-demand banking goes wrong, there can be some pretty big ramifications. So, having the humans sat alongside that technology I think is absolutely vital in financial services in particular. And therefore, I had a team, we've got a team of about 4,000 people serving customers every day. The idea was, how do we get them closer to where our customers are? And that is digital. So we set up chat channels through internet banking, through mobile banking. And we've, over the last few years, worked on how we grow the use of that channel, not only for contact centres, but the wider kind of retail part of HSBC's business in particular, because customers tend to come to the contact centre as a starting point, but they can often head off in lots of different directions depending what their inquiry is. That's a kind of telephony based approach that works well. Why would you not have that in chat as well? So we've been working on like fraud support teams and underwriting teams, and so the chat service is pretty seamless for our customers, and that's been a big part of the plan for the last few years.
Interesting. So it came then out of the rising customer expectations. You've mentioned pizza ordering and stuff like that, and that everybody obviously is kind of digital native. And I suppose the difference between a product and a service these days is blurring. Is Uber a product or a service? Is Spotify a product or a service? It's kind of like that line's getting really gray. And the more that people do online, the more that people do on their phones and stuff like that, the more they expect. And therefore, I've actually moved banks a number of times because of poor experiences elsewhere. I won't mention the brands. It's not HSBC, but I've had poor experiences and I've moved banks because of it. And so it was that the main driving factor was the fact that really meeting customer expectations was at the heart of it, or was there any other drivers that were going on? You mentioned the pandemic. I imagine all businesses were hit kind of fairly hard during the pandemic. Was there any other drivers, or was it predominantly to try and really kind of get ahead as far as meeting customer expectations are concerned?
Yeah, that was front and center, was about the customer and customer service. We needed to evolve, and we needed to evolve and get closer to where our customers are, and where we believe they would continue to be. And say the growth in digital channels is, yes, it's accelerated because of the pandemic, but it was already there. It was already happening. Is it more efficient? Yes. So, there's a commercial benefit to doing this, but that wasn't the driver. The driver was customer experience. You touched on, moving your banking, Kane. The relationship a customer has with their bank is still one of trust, and it's one of trust that works when the bank fixes something or reassures you or gives you support in a certain way. And that's when things go wrong is generally where that's fallen down. And that you can blame processes, you can blame technology, but often it's people in the middle of it. The contact center workers themselves are often stuck in the middle of it, and the customers. So it's a people on people issue still every day. So part of the strategy here was not only about creating new channels for customers to contact us and getting our people closer to where those customers are, but also then being able to utilize the technology, but with the people at the right times. So, I don't think anybody wants to run a business where they're continually having to employ more and more and more people and driving up your cost base. That just doesn't make any commercial sense. So, having customers in a place where you can deploy some automation, deploy some chatbots to provide that kind of on-demand banking experience that I touched on, but always having the mindset that customers can always drop out to an agent at any point, any time. We don't dead end. There always has to be an exit point. was central, because it is a customer service play. The strategy is about offering a great service, and we see it in our NPS scores. And our NPS scores on our chat channels are twice what they are on voice. So customers are voting for it to say they really like it.
Interesting. That's interesting. I always think that the voice channel feels more immediate, but the chat channel, I suppose, is more kind of contextual and easier to adopt, because you don't need to switch channels almost if you're already in the app or you're already on the website, whatever like that. Maybe chat's more natural.
But it's more conversational, as in there's the way we've structured it, there's no distinct start and stop to that conversation. So our chat conversations, customer can leave it and come back to it at any point. And yes, we try to be there as quick as we can. There's certain interactions where customers just need an instant response, but there's certain interactions where they'll wait a little bit of time, or they want to go at their pace. You think about how we run our lives today. You're fitting in picking up the kids from school, you're fitting in different work priorities. Banking isn't, it has to be able to fit around all of that, all around life. I think that's an important theory to this, and that providing a chat service where it is a continuous conversation that the customer can go at the pace they want to go at, I think is a really important part. Whereas when they think about a phone call, if there is a distinct start and stop, you often have to carve out time. I think we've probably all had the experience where somebody in a contact center of any organization has promised to call you back and they haven't. And in the frustrations of that, whereas the chat conversation and the way we've structured it, where you can pick it up whenever you want, the customer's in control of that, not the organization.
Yeah. There's less pressure as well when it comes to the automation side of things. The problem sometimes with voice user interfaces for fairly complex use cases is that sometimes it requires a bit of thinking time. I need to think about what my response is going to be, and then when I speak, it's in real time, and I can't correct what I speak as I speak. A lot of NLU systems and ASR systems struggle with that, and so with the chat channel, I suppose you've also, as you mentioned there, going at the user's pace. A user's got more time to think, more time to consider, more time to kind of think through what it is that they're saying, sort of thing. Which is not to disparage the voice channel, because I think that in the moment, voice user interfaces and voice assistants are absolutely ideal. It's just that some channels have different kind of pros and cons, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've don't get me wrong, we've invested heavily in our voice technology. We replaced the IVR and put a conversational IVR in a couple of years ago. So that was a sizable undertaking to deliver that, and that has unlocked the opportunity to improve service further. The amount of agent to agent transfers dropped because we better understood what the customer was actually calling us for, as well as offering out enhanced self-serve capabilities. So created space in the telephone agent population to handle the slightly more complex or slightly more emotionally driven, event driven challenges that customers face. And it's playing out today. Is more and more customers won't be lost on anybody that cost of living challenges in the UK are right. They're out there, aren't they? And customers are coming to the bank to say, help. How can I don't need people processing payments or transactional banking on the phone, really. I need people helping our customers when they really need that support. So we've invested in the telephony infrastructure and technology as much as open up the channels, so customers now have a choice. And we've got, again, the same principles, the same blend of, in the IVR, you can always drop out to a human. There's always a human voice to help you behind that. You can, this week we're launching the ability to even cross from the IVR into the chat channels to continue conversation there. So, that ability to continue that interaction rather than the distinct start and stop of voice.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good. I mean, the routing is a really good use case because you solve a real customer and agent problem, but you also gather such a wealth of data. because you're not only getting people saying transfer me to, my, I don't know, complaints, or transfer me to balance inquiries or whatever. It's often very specific things that they'll say. And if you can build a language model around that, you're able to gather data that was previously unattainable or just going straight into the heads of the agents, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really interesting program to actually even start putting the conversational IVR in, because the amount of utterances is just mind blowing. If you just take one use case, moving house, there's probably 100 different ways you could articulate you want to change your address, and trying to capture those, and then we've referenced it quite a bit because there's no getting away from it. The pandemic threw in new words, new phrases that we hadn't even come across before. That they weren't in commonplace language. They didn't exist. That we've had to adopt, adapt to, and find ways of utilizing that. So you're right. The language model's been, and the continuous tuning of that language model is absolutely critical.
Absolutely, yeah. Furlough. I didn't even know what furlough was the first 4 times I heard it
I don't think
during the pandemic.
Probably one of the most Googled words when it first came out. I bet it was everybody looking up what it meant.
Yeah, it sounds like a horse race, doesn't it? Oh, they've got four furloughs to go. Yeah, it's mad. So did you start with the chat then? If we go back to, you mentioned what the key kind of drivers were. Was it the chat channels that you started with first? Is that right?
Yeah. So we were voice dominated, bit of email, and really it was, let's go and get chat up and running. That's where our customers are in the digital arena. We're going to get close. So if I remember it rightly, I think it was chat into public website, then into internet banking, then into the mobile app, and the integrations that came there. I think that was the biggest unlocker. Really getting into the mobile app, it created this ability to move from a kind of, we almost operated very synchronously on public website and internet banking. It was almost just a replication of voice, which was never really where I wanted to take it. I wanted to take it into a genuine conversation. So mobile banking and mobile chat has really been that game changer, and that's where we see a lot of the customer contact today is in that mobile chat space. And we spent a bit of time operating without a bot. We decided not to do a bot on day one. Didn't think it was the right thing to do. We wanted to learn what our customers wanted to chat about. And into your point about data, I mean, it's so data rich, being able to interrogate chat transcripts and put them through analytics tools to draw out themes and the type of language. So we gave it some time before we launched our first bot, or even before we started to try and launch our first bot. I mean, frankly, Kane, our first attempt wasn't very successful. I think probably most people in similar roles to me bear the same scars of their first.
You'll always build it twice. Is David Lowe's mantra.
So we were probably 9 months post launch of chat before we got a bot going, and then it's just grown from strength to strength. And what I'm really proud about our bot solution, this which crosses all the channels, just the same bot working across mobile, internet banking, public website, is that it's not built by our technology colleagues. So yes, we need IT, yes, we need digital teams to help us, but actually the bot and the bot flows and the conversations are designed by frontline contact center agents. So we've set up a capability where got about 50-ish people, changes on a regular basis, but building chatbot flows. And these guys are used to serving customers. So what we said earlier about the language, how we need to explain things, how we capture that, and then we've got slightly more technical capability in terms of the NLU and how we build the flows linked to that to that capability. But it is genuinely is a bot built by the people who serve the customers. And I'm not saying actually unique. I know other organizations are now doing that, but that was a very simple learn early on. First iteration of a bot didn't really work. It was very technology driven. I've got some super talented IT colleagues, but actually what it shone a light on is that it's the people who are serving the customers that know the customers the best.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter how much data you can throw at it, that human experience to make your bots more human. We don't hide the fact you're talking to a bot. We don't try and disguise it. We're very clear that you're chatting to a bot, but the people building it are the ones that serve the customers as well. And that's made a really big difference. What it's also meant is that we are a bit of a buzzword, but we are really agile. So, and something happens in the industry, something happens in, within HSBC, then we need to get a bot out. We can get it out in 24 hours because, it's not a tech delivery, it's a frontline delivery. So while we're building, knowledge content for the contact center agents, or content to go on the public website for customers, for if an issue's happened, we can build a bot at exactly the same pace, so it can all get launched at the same time.
That's good. That's a good way to do it, in terms of having some integration with the rest of the business, so that content changes over here and then it's updated in the bot, or new content is published over here and it's also put into the bot. Is quite a mature way of operating. Usually it's the bot team or the assistant team are running around like headless chickens, trying to figure out what's happening in the business and trying to work out what's changed and trying to get data from somewhere. And it's like, so would you describe the relationship between the team and the rest of the organization as a fairly kind of tight knit one then? What's the kind of collaboration like between internal teams to get stuff into the system?
I think it's really healthy, Ken. I mean, it helps that this kind of vision, this direction. We've had the best, exec sponsorship you could hope for. Our CEO sees the value. So Ian's been really keen for us to do this and really supportive. The ability for us to scale comes from that, that sponsorship where others want part of it. This isn't a contact center capability anymore. This is an organizational capability. So, it's touched on earlier. The contact center might be the front door, but we have specialist teams now working in this area as well. And we're just working on right now, like for our financial support team, for those customers who are facing some financial challenges. We're working on actually how does a bot actually help in that scenario? Because again, put the customer lens on it. Some people will, be a bit embarrassed, or may not be in an environment where they can openly talk about their finances. So they might want to chat because it's more private, or it's probably potentially slightly less embarrassing to chat with somebody than tell them if you're facing a bit of trouble. So, and then what we're trying to work through there is then, okay, so we still want a human to deal with that. That's really important. That's an emotional event that we want a human to do, but actually can still use a bit of AI, a bit of a bot in there, maybe to do the data collection. Because if you're going to help somebody build some kind of financial plan or repayment plan, or whatever they need, we do need the data, we need the information. Sometimes you've got to get that from the customer. So we'll work through how we build like a Tango bot that can come in as almost like an assistant of the agent. So yeah, the business is bought in, which I think is a really, really important. I'm at the point now, which I'm really proud of, is that I get requests asking for my team's expertise into other parts of the business to help them do it. So it feels like we've got momentum. It feels like we've got lots of people like really interested and buying in to what we're trying to do. And that again is making a big difference, because if we look at the number of customers now utilizing our chat channels and using this technology and crossing from voice to chat, and it's growing massively. And I generally think that's because as a business, customers don't differentiate. They're dealing with HSBC, they're not dealing with HSBC customer services or fraud. It's just, we're a brand and we're a bank, and frankly, customers don't care which department, they just want serving. So the more parts of the organization we can have working in this way, utilizing this technology, but in the same ethos and the same theory, can only be good for the customers. And they are definitely voting with their feet, because the numbers are growing hugely.
Definitely. That's when it becomes when it starts to become a strategic capability. When you think about a good example I like to use is if you look at some of, I suppose, your competitors over the pond, Capital One, for example, where their kind of assistant, as you said, it's exactly the same when it comes to digital service delivery in general. If you've got an app, customers go to the app, they don't expect to have to go into the fraud division and deal with the fraud department's architecture and systems and processes, and then go into the customer service conversations, have to deal with the customer service systems and processes. It's all just HSBC, it's all just the brand. And when you speak to the brand about anything, you expect consistency across all of those conversations. And therefore, having a front-facing assistant that's there as your first point of contact for all of those issues and across all of those channels seems to me to be the way that things are heading. And I think one of the really good examples is Capital One, where their assistant is available on Alexa, it's available in the call center, it's in the app. But not only is it a conversational assistant, it's also a genuine digital assistant because it's there in an email. It'll send you proactive emails and it'll come from Eno, not from Capital One. They've got like browser extensions to facilitate secure payments on websites and stuff like that, all branded as Eno. And so my kind of question always is at what point do customers stop thinking that they're interacting with Capital One, the brand? At what point does Eno become its own brand? And at that point, it is well and truly not only an internal kind of capability, but it is definitely a strategic differentiator. And it sounds as though, from what you're explaining, from internal support and buy-in at a senior level, plus internal departments leaning on your team for expertise, plus channel expansion, multi-channel use cases. I'm imagining we haven't got into use cases yet, but I'm imagining you're doing some kind of like transactional use cases as well as the kind of low-hanging fruit on the FAQ side. So it sounds as though you're developing that capability for this assistant to be the front-facing thing across most channels, the front kind of first touch point across most channels. Is that where you see the future of customer experience heading? Is every channel having an AI mediated assistant on there?
I absolutely do, Ken. And I think where we potentially could end up a few years down the line yet, but I think where we could get to is that so we have a very active runway of functionality we're trying to build into our digital channels, all based on customer demand, all based on what our customers are asking us for. They will get to a point where you'll never fill an app, but can you make an app that busy with that much functionality that it becomes hard to navigate? Because we've seen that with websites, and I think we'll get to a point where a virtual assistant and a genuine virtual assistant, not just a bot in the chat channel, will almost be like the concierge. It'll be at the front of an app, and it will direct you around. It will take you to the parts, a bit like an IVR does. It'll connect you to based on what your need is, even if that's just to flick across pages or carousels in an app. I think we will as a consumer base, we will almost self-serve or navigate the app less. It will get done for us, and then that opens up different capabilities, because as you've touched on, it's voice assistants, whether it's Alexa or other brands are available, obviously. The question I was asked last week, I think I don't know the answer to this yet, but was where does voice notes fit in our strategy? Where we see it in Asia quite a bit with customers talking to their devices, sending voice notes. We see it in the kind of younger generations using voice notes to interact more. So this 4 or 5 years ago, people were saying to me, "Our voice is dead. It's all going to move to chat." Well, no, voice isn't dead. Voice is resurgent, but it's probably in a different structure. And it's probably in voice notes rather than phone calls. And we've got to work out what the strategy is for that, because it will be slightly different. It's got lots of similarities to kind of an asynchronous chat experience, but it will be slightly different. And how do you make it conversational? And how do you brand it? How do you make it feel as human as you want to make it feel? They're all interesting dilemmas to face into. But yeah, absolutely. I think we're not there yet in terms of creating a service where customers recognise it as anything other than HSBC. You know, Capital One was clearly operating in a different space there. But do I think it's something that over time customers will almost default as their contact point? Yes, and it's already happening now. You know, we're seeing it with millions of customers now naturally going to chat, naturally using a bot, using the technology, and not defaulting to the phone. And that hasn't taken that long for that to change.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even have to be branded, you know, that, you know, they made a very conscious decision to make it, you know, and to make it its own kind of thing. But, you know, it doesn't even need to be that, to be honest. As long as it's delivering value for customers and delivering value for the business, then that's all that really matters. What kind of, I imagine when you were starting with some kind of low-hanging fruit, as I was kind of alluding to, FAQs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What kind of range of use cases are you covering now? You mentioned routing in the IVR. I think you alluded to some self-service in the IVR as well. I wonder if you can just give us a lowdown on voice and chat, the nature of the use cases that you're covering at the minute.
Yeah, so on the voice side, we do a bit of transactional, a bit of kind of information provision, not necessarily FAQs as such, but it might be, you know, simple interactions like playing out a list of transactions, through to the ability to, you know, cancel cards, replace cards, etc. I think there's more opportunity in that space, and I think it's predominantly still around transacting, you know, changes of address, those type of things, but really focused on the high frequency activity. That I think that's where an IVR does its heavy lifting. But we do use it to try and help kind of educate and steer and direct as well. So we spend a lot of time looking at the messaging in the IVR and how we infuse data in the IVR to make sure we play messages that are relevant to our customers. In the chatbot space, you're right, much more FAQ focused. We have got some transactional bots running today, which is mostly based around card usage and card inquiries, card interactions, which was use case was partly because of some regulatory change that we wanted to support, and we knew that from a retailer perspective that they had a bit of an adoption curve to go through for e-commerce transactions. But for our customers, we did as well, and we wanted to make sure that both the bot and the IVR could support that and support customers. I think if you have a payment declined online for whatever you're trying to do, it's hard not to default to the worst possible thought first. So my card's being declined. Oh God, is my bank account empty? Is something gone wrong? And actually, in those scenarios, it could be something as simple as the transaction hasn't been quite processed in the right way. We want to be able to very quickly reassure our customers that actually there's nothing wrong. It just ask the retailer to reprocess it. They'll send it down the right route, and everything will be fine. So having a bot that's got the right intelligence, having an IVR that's got the right intelligence to recognize that, to be able to differentiate the different decline codes, all of those type of things that might happen in the background, is our first step really into a fulfillment bot or a transaction bot. And I've got a huge long list of things that I would like to do. I think the most important bit with this, Ken, is what I'm seeing is that I don't think there's a huge value in trying to get a bot to do what customers can do themselves in the digital space in particular. You can make a payment in 3 clicks on our app. Why would I want a bot to replicate that? What I'd like a bot to do is to enhance that experience. So for example, paying your credit card bill, couldn't get any easier than doing it in the app. Simplest thing in the world. But if you want to chat to the bot about your credit card bill, and actually you ask it to make the payment for you, and then it provides you access to information that you can't self-serve. Interest rate you're on, if you're not making the full payment every month, how long it will take to pay off for, and offer up value-adding information that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you walk in a branch, they might have told you that information. Can a bot do that value add? I think it can, and I think it should. So if you're going to get the bot to transact, no point just replicating a digital interaction. It needs to be more value adding, and that's the bit that we're now working on. To say, right, long list of use cases, but what's all the subcategories off that would actually add genuine value to that transaction?
That's really sensible. Yeah, I suppose that there's if something's working well, why fix it? I suppose. And the other thing that a assistant would give you in certain contexts is not necessarily new use cases, but certainly new queries that you might not have anticipated just from the digital channel alone. Like you mentioned there, paying your credit card bill. People can go into the app, pay the credit card bill, and it's done and dusted. Transfer money from one account to the other, it's done and dusted. What you don't get is what else do people need that you're not yet serving, but you don't know about. And I think that's an interesting space where assistants can play. Like, are people asking what their interest rate is? Are people asking what the next month payment is? Are people asking about limits and all that kind of stuff? Like, what would be the needs that arise, as you say, the subcategory to the broad use case? And is there anything in there that you're able to uncover through virtue of having an assistant? And therefore you're not exposing more needs. What you're doing is essentially capturing and delivering against needs that were there but being previously unmet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And this is where having I'm really lucky. I've got a great team with me who are looking at utterances, looking at failures in the NLU, where it's just not detecting what the customer's actually asking for. And that's the gold dust, right? That's what's both on the IVR and on the chatbot side. That's what's building those use cases. Those, I call them the +1 conversations. You've got a primary intent, but what's the +1? That's what we find out, and that's where you can do it the other way. I think because as we digitize service, I think what you can get is we'll actually look at what are the inquiries you still get in the human channels which you haven't digitized yet. But the quickest way to get it to it is probably is look at your transcripts, look at the unrecognized intents and say, right, that isn't just a change in language, that's an inquiry that we just are not set up to handle. And commercially, it's probably going to be more cost effective to build a bot to handle 3, 4, 5, 6 of those together than it is trying to build an interface where the customer can self-serve it. Your mass interactions, you probably still want your digital teams to build your interface, to still build on your app or your website. But actually, for some of the fringe cases, the smaller, those +1s, as I say, I think if you can access a simple API and draw that information and then have 5, 6 different journey flows running off the back of that information, that's going to be more cost effective, quicker to bring it to your customers, and starts to add real value to that interaction, which that's where you're going from a transaction to a proper interaction then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned value there. How and at the beginning, at the top of the conversation, you were talking about the real driver behind this was to get into the channels where customers are, extend the availability of the service, all that kind of stuff. How are you measuring the value that these assistants are creating now? Like, if someone was listening to this and saying, "Oh, well, I don't know whether we should do this or not," like, what are some of the examples of the value that you think is important in doing this?
Yeah, we could spend 3 hours trying to talk through this. I'll try and give you the quick version, because we're probably on version 20, 25 maybe of a calculator to try and work this through, because this is not easy. What I'd say at the outset, and it links to something we said earlier about kind of senior sponsorship on this type of stuff. When you are in this world, you can start to see the value once it's live. Once it's just an idea, it takes a bit of a leap of faith. So, you can calculate as many numbers on a spreadsheet as you want, but until you go up and run with it, you're never 100% sure it's going to add the value you think it's going to add. And that's whether that's the chat channel itself, whether it's investing in the IVR, experience in that space, proving out a business case is invaluable. But there are a few models that can tell you this type of stuff. So I think what I would work on, especially in the chatbot space, is here. When we first started, there was lots of focus on containment rate. I'm not convinced that's right, because anybody who's been in and around contact centers for any period of time knows you can basically gamify any data, any single KPI you want to, and it's the same with containment rate. You could just get your bot turning out your phone number on every inquiry and go, "Oh, I've got 100% containment rate." It's just not what you want. So number one is and always will be NPS. We measure NPS religiously, and that is ultimately the most important value, because although NPS is very, very hard to then spin into commercial bottom line benefit, that age-old keep your customers happy, everything else will follow. It's still true. That hasn't changed. So the best measure of that we've got is NPS. So we measure NPS religiously on what we do with the bot, what we do with chat, what we do with the IVR, what we do with the service as a whole. But in the bot space, we'll also look at a bit of containment rate, but we'll look at it through a lens of what is it we're trying to contain versus where do we want it to hand off to a human. And where it starts to get complicated is when you build things like Tango bots, where you're dropping them in and out, because that throws out your numbers all over the place. So that can become a bit tricky. We'll also look at the number of interactions per conversation. So although I said earlier that, especially in the chat space, the conversation never starts and stops. So measuring purposes, we'll normally measure it over a 12-hour window. So you can start to run some of your kind of data off the back of it, your performance data. And we'll look at the number of interactions, almost like a customer effort measure, to say how many times did the customer have to interact in that conversation. And clearly on each conversation it'll be different because the need will be different. But when you scale it up over 750,000 chats a month, then you can kind of get an average and go, well, is it 4 messages the customer sends us in that conversation? Is it 5? Is it 6? You start to get customer effort. Then you can flip it the other way and say, how many is the bot doing versus how many is the human doing? So you can start to build out your efficiency view there. In the IVR space, it's slightly different, but not significantly. So NPS still number one. Still look at that. I want to understand the customer experience. I do look at containment rate in the IVR, probably slightly more than I do on the chatbot side. I want to make sure that the IVR is containing in the right way. So that's why the NPS side comes in. What I do focus on specifically in the IVR, probably because there's more exit points into the organization. Our chat population, yes, we have some specialist teams, but the kind of chatbot just basically needs to route, when it hands off to an agent, just needs to route to a group of agents. And IVR needs to consider much more specialisms in the routing. So I touched on earlier about transfer rate. I do look at that as almost like a commercial outcome, because you can spin that into you can put the dollar sign to that one and work out actually how much does reducing your transfers really cost. So we'll look at transfer rates and accuracy of the IVR and how well it's detecting the intent. Does it need to use disambiguation questions? We look at that as well. So if it's using disambiguation, is it actually enhancing the routing capability? If not, disambiguation certainly isn't enhancing the customer journey. So you've got to make that trade-off and say, well, I'm going to ask 2 disambiguation questions and it still doesn't get it routing any better. Why am I even doing it? So there's, as you can hopefully tell, Ken, it's very customer focused. That's where, that was a reason for doing all of this. And this is why I try and stay true to that today. Yes, we can measure the commercials and all kinds of spreadsheets and calculators to do that. But ultimately, knowing how well your customers interact with the technology and the humans, and being able to have almost like the human NPS, the technology NPS, and then a blended one for the interaction, that's the underpinning one. That's what dictates whether we make changes or whether we keep it the same, ultimately.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's good. I think NPS is a good one because at least it's a North Star. The problem I think I've seen often is that there's so much data that you can get from this stuff. How many intents did we capture? What was the accuracy? What were our no matches? And what's that rate like? And then what's our speech recognition rate? And then all this kind of technical data that you can get to. And then it's like, well, in the past, we've kind of implemented things where it'll be like, if in the FAQ side of things, you talk about containment rate. I concur with you that containment as a phrase is generally a bad kind of phrase to use in this space, because the aim of the assistance is not really to contain somebody and like trap them there. The aim is to serve them and get done what they need to get done. And if speaking to a human is the best outcome for that use case, then that's the point of the conversation. So it's very difficult to use containment rate, I find. But measuring whether a conversation was successful beyond NPS, like did the user get what? Because you might have a conversation with a chatbot, feel it's a pleasant experience, give it a decent NPS rating because there's nothing really wrong with it, but you might not have actually got the actual answer to your question. So I think the gap that I've seen a lot of is it's very difficult to measure when a conversation is successful versus when it's not, especially with those kind of like quick fire FAQ style things. Like it's quite a quantitative kind of, or qualitative rather, thing to measure. But I think that North Star, NPS, and everything else flowing from that at least gives you one, it's a valuable metric, and then everything else should come from that. Everything else is aimed at improving that NPS or keeping it where it is, which is, it's good, yeah, because a lot of people can get distracted and it can be quite confusing to figure out where to start with all this stuff,
Yeah, and we've utilized first contact resolution as a measure, but most contact center people will be well au fait with that. We've utilized that as a measure. The challenge with FCR, as we've seen more and more customers move to chat and this kind of asynchronous, this never-ending conversation, as it were, is that's made that really blurry. When FCR is ultimately just going to measure, did the customer come back in a set period of time to ask you the same thing? Well, if I've started a conversation, then I've got to go and pick the kids up from school, and I come back and I want to pick it up again. Well, how do you build that into an FCR measure? So that's the kind of historic kind of contact center one I would have gone to, and we still do look at that, but I don't think I think what I'm learning throughout this is there is no one single data point that is going to give you a true view. It's going to be a blend of them. One thing that I want to experiment with a bit more is that we have a quality model for our people, and the quality model should all lead to good customer outcomes and ultimately equal then good NPS. How do we build the same quality model for our assistants, our virtual agents? Does that look and feel the same? Now, yeah, the obvious bit there is that the machine is built to work in the way the machine is built, so you're probably doing it the wrong way around. But is the design of the assistant lead to good quality? That's maybe a way of doing it, because I think you're spot on. Was it a successful outcome? Unless you ask the customer up front, what would be a successful outcome today? How are you really going to know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's the mosaic effect, isn't it? Can you piece together the important bits of the data to say, look, that now makes a picture, and I'm happy with that, or I'm not happy with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm noticing a lot actually of companies having the same kind of parity as far as how you judge quality from agents and virtual assistants. And almost there's actually been deployments where the exact kind of metrics that are used to kind of judge, I suppose, agent performance are the exact same used for the bot, and the bot's basically treated exactly the same, which is interesting. But I also think that in some cases, it's horses for courses, isn't it? Because your bot might be doing very specific things that are different to the agent. Like your live chat session, I don't know if this is the case or not, but for example, your live chat sessions might expire after a period of time because the person's speaking to other people or whatever. Whereas a bot or a messaging use case, it might be asynchronous and the conversation might last 3 days. And so as long as the customer got what they needed from it, the effort on the bot's part is negligible. Whereas if it was spending a human 5 minutes each time to respond to 20 messages over 4 days, it's a slightly different level of effort than it is for a bot kind of thing. So there's still, this thing hasn't been solved yet, I don't think, which is really interesting.
No, and that's, I mean, the downfall there is you're trying to measure efficiency and effort of a machine. Well, why? My simple view is be customer obsessive. What's the effort of the customer?
Yeah.
Does it go at the pace that the customer wants it to go at? And as we've learned, especially with chatbots, as we learned over the last few years, you can make really subtle little tweaks that make a big difference to the experience. There's times where we've had the bot, it's responded too quick, and it's almost like, oh, it's in your face. It's like, it's almost like this passive aggressive bot type. It's like, boom, here's your answer, and that's not very helpful. And actually, that could put some customers off. Whereas, we've also experimented and gone the other way and put quite big delays in, to the point where people are like, is my mobile phone signal still there? Am I still connected to Wi-Fi? Because they're thinking something's gone wrong. So, even those really little tweaks can make a big difference. But you got to test it. You got to play around with it and work out what works.
Yeah. It can feel a little bit too obviously robotic when the response times are too quick. Like there's a bot called Mitsuku, and for years it won what's called the Loebner Prize, which is like, for a while, I think maybe still today, the measure of how good a chatbot can get. And it was created by Steve Worswick. We've had him on a podcast in the past. But if you try out the Mitsuku bot, I don't know what it's like today, but the second you press return, the response is given to you. And it's just so quick. You're like, it's then obvious that it's not, it's obvious that it's definitely pre-programmed. Whereas creating a bit of space, at least enough for it to be more human-like, like you won't respond to me like that. You'll need a few seconds, a millisecond or so, or a couple of milliseconds to try and understand first and then put your response together. And having it too quick makes it feel like it's obviously robotic and predeterministic rather than natural and conversational kind of thing.
Where I'd love to get to is a point where can almost mirror the customer's pace. So the bot can automatically detect, so you can do sentiment analysis today, it can detect that. So why can't we detect that a customer's potentially pausing or being very thoughtful in the way it's interacting, way they're interacting, and can the bot kind of mirror it? But then you've got some customers who are like, I just want to get on with it. I just want to get to the answer. Could it speed up or slow down? That'd be quite a cool position to try and get a bot into and get it to work that way.
100%. There's a company called Behavioral Signals which just does that, but not the full extent. So it will listen to the caller and how they're speaking when they're talking about who they want to be put through to. And then it will match them with an agent that's got the same conversational speaking style. And it's been proven actually to end up in higher quality conversations, however they define it, whether it's NPS, whatever it is. And so the technology exists to be able to understand a speaking style. But I remember writing years ago, I think probably in about 2018, about kind of almost what you're saying, but it's like, can AI profile somebody's personality type, for want of a better word, and then be able to respond accordingly? So if you're the kind of person that jumps in a car and says, get me directions to work, but you really want to understand detail, then it will say, well, we're going to have to redirect you because there's been a traffic jam on the M1 and this is what's happened. The delays are going to be this much, so I'm going to take you this way instead, and really explain everything. Whereas if you're someone who doesn't care about detail, you just want to get to the point, it'll just say, okay, redirecting you because of an accident, and that's it. And so it's kind of like being able to use the AI to better profile customers to then match it with an agent that is better suited to then level up the quality of the conversation. It's I think we're a bit further away, but there's signs of the technology being there that might enable that.
Maybe the choice of language for that intent is part of the key. The scenario of asking Alexa, what's the weather today versus am I going to get wet today? Am I going to get wet today? It's a simple yes or no answer. So it kind of gives it away, and the customer just, or the consumer just wants the what wants to know. Whereas somebody who's asking about the weather could be, wants it reading out verbatim from the newspaper type approach.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know we're coming up on time. I just want to get your thoughts on, for people listening in who might be. I mean, it sounds from hearing you kind of speak, it sounds as though you're definitely kind of on the more mature end of kind of organizational maturity as far as these conversational AI services are considered. You've got, I don't know what the size of the team is, we didn't get into that, but you've got a team that work on this stuff. You've got organizational support at the very top. It's obviously got budget assigned to it. It's performing well and delivering value. You've got internal stakeholders throughout the business coming to you for your expertise, probably in the process of having some kind of hub and spoke model set up where your center of excellence can advise. So you're definitely kind of on that scale to definite maturity. If you take a step back and you're people tuning in who maybe only got one chatbot deployed in one channel, maybe it's not quite doing transactional stuff yet, or they've got maybe some IVR routing, no kind of chat presence, and maybe leadership are not really as supportive as they might be. Just generally think about yourself 3 years ago, whatever. What are the kind of pieces of advice that you would share? Some of the critical things that you either did do or would have done differently in the past if you were going to advise someone trying to get to the level that you're at now?
Yeah, I think the biggest bit of advice I would give is invest the time to share with your stakeholders, your internal sponsors, your execs. Invest the time to share what you believe with them, to get them to believe it as well, because that just unlocks everything for you. So the biggest change for us was really when we got all of the kind of component parts of the retail business and we're not there yet. It's obviously a big organization, but the majority of it, we invested heavily over probably 18 months to educate, and just get them to understand it. But understand it through not how the technology works, leave that to us, leave that to those who enjoy knowing that stuff. What does it mean for the customer? What does it mean for your people? What does it ultimately mean for your business? Those are the three things that we try to get across. And then I think the second thing is growth doesn't come by just wishing it to happen. You've got to very deliberately go out and get use cases. So when people from across the organization ask me for help, or they say, I want what you guys can do, first thing I always say is, right, so tell me the challenges you face, tell me the challenges the customers are facing that are interacting with your part of the business, and let me help problem solve. Because a lot of this is about problem solving. It's about getting the technology and the people closer to where the customer is. And so rather than, thankfully I don't get many people come and say, oh, can I have a chatbot, please? Normally they come to me and say, I'm trying to do this. Like the financial support team example, where got more and more customers need help in a different way. Right, we know how to do that. Let us in the door, and we can come and help you design that. So I think the most important bit would be get the business, get the organization bought in. If you're leading it, you're going to be passionate about it. You're going to believe in it. That should be infectious. So go and get time in front of the people that you need to help sponsor, because that will just make life so much easier. I think the next bit is definitely pick off your use cases. You can't do it all, so pick off it each bit at a time and go, right, which is the next bit, but use the terminology like North Star. I'm really clear on where I'm trying to take this to, what I'm trying to achieve. So there's phases. Can't do it all at once. So I always said it's probably going to take 5+ years to get to where I think we want to get to. Realistically, it's probably going to take even longer. But know the phases you're trying to get through. So if you're just starting off, right, where do I want to be in 12 months' time? And what is it going to take to do that bit? Right, what's the next bit I need to build, and the next bit I need to build? And then the final bit is final bit of advice is, don't be shy to tell your customers this is what you're building for them. I think if I had my time again, I would have been slightly bolder and slightly more overt with our customers initially. You know, we were quite conservative. We went quite tentatively. When we first put mobile chat live, I think we put it live with 10,000 customers. We'll just pause it and just see what they think. Like, we kind of knew it was the right thing, but we weren't quite sure whether we got it right. And then it wasn't until we'd rolled it out to all of our customers, millions and millions of people had access to it, that we then started to tell our customers it existed.
Mm.
And it wasn't until actually, we got the first proper set of NPS data where we went, actually, this is, customers are really loving this. That suddenly we then went really big and telling them it existed. I think we should have probably been a bit braver and gone a bit earlier, because it's kind of all interlinked, and so you get more customers who want to use it, easier to grow it, easier to do your next steps.
Fantastic. Well, Andy, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing that story. It's absolutely fantastic. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in, whether you are tuning in live or on the podcast. Definitely join us tomorrow. We'll be talking to Corbis Craigling of Vodacom, now left Vodacom. We'll be talking all things conversational AI technology. We've got Botium on the podcast, we've talked about in this episode. We've talked about the value of data and what it can be used for and how you can leverage it as a strategic asset. And that's basically what Botium help you do. And then we have on June the 9th, 6 p.m. GMT, we've got a really good webinar with Deepgram, and we're going to be talking about why big tech doesn't innovate as fast as you would think and how you might find better performance in niches. And so please do join us for that. I'll put all the links to that in the show notes. Andy, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been wicked.